Hello again, and welcome to yet another episode of Into the Hemaverse. Oh my god, I forgot my catchphrase. Your podcast for everything here, everything in the Hemaverse. Oh my god, I'm so bad. I'm so bad, guys. This is absolutely going into the final cut. We have another episode today for you, and hopefully we'll be able to get it out by Friday. I am, of course, Colin Vredenberg, and with me, as always, my co-hosts, David Rao
Hey.
and Nathan Graperis.
Hey.
Guys, how was your week this week?
I mean, at this point, I think the answer for me is pretty much the same as every other week before.
Yeah,
I'll let you know when things change.
well, I'm always hopeful coming into the podcast, like, oh, hey, maybe something fun happened. So I always ask. Nathan is actually doing things. What are you up to this week, buddy?
We've got a couple of people signed up for our online beginners course starting next month, so that's cool.
Nice.
And I've been trying to shoot 100 arrows a day with my longbow, and I've got like a sick blister on my hand now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Also gross, but nice. I didn't even know you like a full 6-foot longbow.
Yeah,
cool.
Bigger than me.
All right.
But yeah, me and a couple of the guys in the club have lofty ambitions to possibly go hunting with some longbows later in the year. And
I have a recurve, but I'm terrible with it, so I don't really use it.
You see, the cool thing is, Colin, when everything is locked down and there's quarantine, that's a fantastic time to do something that you can do at home with a recurve bow that you just have 30 minutes and just shoot out a bunch of arrows.
True, and it's not even like a tough draw weight. It's like I think it's like 50 or 60 pound draw weight. I could probably just even in my quarantine state, I could probably still pull it. So
that's a good draw weight. I mean, I think in Texas, at least for bow hunting, like you only need like 35 pounds.
Oh, okay. All right.
Surprise.
Well, for our listeners, we've got a great show this week. We have on as a guest Chuck Gross from HemaStrong, who's going to talk fitness and nutrition with us. Something I know that definitely is come up in my HEMA journey, and I don't know about you guys, but it seems like a thing that a lot of people have a lot of questions about. So it should be a good show. But first, the news. The big news this week is that we have officially launched a Patreon, and you can find that at patreon.com/intothehemaverse. I will put it up on screen and put a link down in the description. But essentially, we have 4 tiers. If you would please check it out, that would be awesome. The higher tiers come with special bonus features, like extra video footage that doesn't get used in the final cut, and some other things, being able to ask questions on our AMAs, etc. Speaking of AMAs, we are going to do one soon. It is not scheduled yet, so we'll have to figure that out at some point. But until then, we need questions to start with. Yes, we are going to be doing it live and taking live questions, but in case things don't run smoothly, I like to have a lot of backup questions to go to. So if you'd like to submit a question, there's 2 ways to do it. One is email. You can email us at intothehemaverse@gmail.com, or you can also put a comment on this video and ask your question. Say, this is for the AMA, ask your question, and hopefully we'll be able to read it and answer it. Well, hopefully we'll be able to answer it. Oh, also, for those of you who've been digging the audio and or MP3 versions of the episodes, I have taken it upon myself to upload all of them. There will be one coming out every day at noon. I think we're on the 2nd episode now, so tomorrow will be the 3rd episode. So you will be able to download them for free, and you can find that on our Patreon. It's a post every single day. So very cool. Let's see. another big news that a big piece of news that I'm excited about. Pro Gauntlets are finally coming out to their Indiegogo backers, and reportedly very soon, for those of us in the States that have ordered one.
Or those of us who thought that they backed the program and didn't.
Yeah,
I was like, yes, and I was like, wait, I don't think I ever actually did it. Man.
yeah. Speaking of backing, though, we were talking about in a previous episode, the facsimiles that Michael Chedester, I'm pronouncing that right. He's been, the guy that runs Wichtenauer. He's been doing those he's been doing facsimiles. The next one is Fiore's Flower of Battle, I believe. I have backed it. I will share a link and put up the page real quick so you can see it. It's really awesome. If you can, I know it's expensive, but if you can at all, it's definitely a book worthy to have. And Nathan even saw one. Not the Flower of Battle, but the
Talhofer one. Yeah, one of my guys got it, and I immediately realized that I did not see that information when it was being put up like 6 months ago. So I contacted Chittister immediately and got onto his list.
Hey, me too. But yeah, they're really fantastic, like just beautiful. Buy it for posterity kind of deals.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they're also fantastic. I mean, not that I have mine yet, but my plan is to use it for our like intro nights to kind of like show people when they walk in, like this is what effect book look like. This is the kind of thing originally that that we would work out of, instead of, I mean, like, the modern books, they're cool, but they're not as like, oh wow, that looks so neat kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just different when you have those like big fat pages with it's just a different. Plus, I mean, trying to read it on Wichtenauer, trying to read it online is just, it's a different experience. Let's say that.
Yeah, for sure.
A different experience. And the last thing for news that I don't know if anybody else is a big pole arms and or halberd fan like I am. Two big things have come out this week. One is Bjorn Ruther, who does Meyerclass Hammerborg on YouTube, has started going through the Meyer halberd plays in video format, which are really cool to see, like done live, of his interpretations, obviously. But they're really, really cool. And I believe Purple Heart Armory is also now selling the special polearm trainers from, I forget what it is, but they're the really nice silver ones that I've seen some people have and haven't gotten to use one yet, but they're really nice. And
those Black Fencer?
I'm not sure.
No, they're not Black Fencer. There's somebody else.
We'll have to look it up, and then I'll put it on the screen here. The magic of editing. All right. So without any further ado, it is time for our guest. Let's bring him in. All right, so today we have Chuck Gross from HemaStrong. He's the founder of HemaStrong, which is a supportive and inclusive online community for Hema fitness, conditioning, and nutrition education. He's also the director of the Longsword Introductory Program at Broken Plow Western Martial Arts in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Chuck, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that we can finally talk about nutrition on this program, something that I know is really kind of close to my heart, and David and I have had many discussions about Hema nutrition. So
awesome. Can't wait.
Yeah. So as we ask all of our guests, first question, give us a quick rundown of how did you get started with historical European martial arts?
All right. So I'm guessing, like most people, I've always kind of loved swords. All my heroes in movies and comics and books always had swords. So that was like, once I knew it was a thing, it was kind of a logical thing for me. I didn't really have any martial arts experience growing up. I watched maybe some kung fu movies or whatever, and then my whole family started taking kung fu in 2016, and it was okay. It was just something we did together, but I didn't really love it. And then in my 30s, every year for my birthday, I try to do something that was like an adventure to accumulate experiences as opposed to like just things. So one year it was like learning to fly a plane, and then a friend of mine shared an event on Facebook that showed people fighting with longswords, and I was like, how did I not know this was a thing? So I immediately signed up for the intro class, and that was like my birthday present for 1 year. And as soon as I got there, I was like, I'm home. This is what I was meant to be doing. Like picking up, like I actually went to a Friday night fight night before my intro class. I had no idea what to expect. All these people looked like they were like rough and tumble people, and like they had a bunch of bruises. And I picked up a longsword, and it was like electricity went through me. And I was like, yep, this is for me. So that's my story as far
Awesome.
as how I found it.
Do you want to name drop the event and or school that you started with?
Yeah, the event was Blood on the River, and the
Okay.
school was Broken Plow.
Cool. Yeah, and I guess so. You're still at Broken Plow, still chugging away on longsword, I guess.
Yep, I've tried a bunch of other things, and I find them interesting, but I think it has to do with just that, like literally all of my heroes had two-handed swords, and it's just like like I said, I get that electrical feeling still to this day, years later.
No, it is the most popular human weapon. Huh?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I said that's awesome.
Yeah, Nathan would say that because he's a longsword.
I mean, I own other swords, so it's not like I don't try them. It's I have other swords, but
it's almost like you can't own just one sword. It's like Pringles, right? You get one, and it's just like
exactly.
All right. So the next question is obviously about Hema Strong, since you're the founder, and it's a specifically like nutrition and conditioning. How did you get started doing that?
So once people realized that I wasn't a biker, because they saw my beard and bald head and thought, hey, this guy's a biker. Once they found out, in after classes and things like that, like what I did as a trainer and nutritionist, obviously they started asking questions, because people see all these advertisements or magazines and like ask all these questions about this stuff. And I started answering their questions. And, so like I was helping one of the club members move, and I was able to pick something up that they thought was heavy. And they're like, oh, wow, you're Hema Strong. So that name kind of started like burrowing in the back of my head.
Right.
And then my first tournament was DC HEMA Open in 2017. And you know how HEMA tournaments can go. Someone partied too hard the night before, probably were still drunk the morning of their fight. They didn't eat breakfast, and they were, I think it was elims, and they passed out. And the people that I knew in my club saw that, and they ran over to get me, knowing that I carried supplies to help with situations like that for myself. So I had a bunch of bananas, some almonds, some Gatorade, some potassium salt, and then I helped that person get back up on their feet. And then it was kind of like the floodgates open, and people like started coming over to me and talking to me. And I was like, up to that point, I was a little like shy about it, talking to people I didn't know, but it just kind of, people just started bombarding me with questions. And I'm like, on the drive home, I was like, I should probably write some of these answers down, because these are probably going to come up more often.
Yeah.
So then as I kind of entrenched myself in the worldwide HEMA community through the internet, I started seeing like all these nutrition myths pop up. So I started writing articles to like cover how do you hydrate for a tournament or for your training. And it just kind of took off from there, started the Facebook group. And it was like this totally organic thing. Like I didn't have a strategy or idea going in. It just became a community more so than like a blog or a website. And it just, it's one of those things where I just kept putting time and effort into it, because I saw a bunch of misinformation out there that I wanted to kind of correct and help people like be able to do what they wanted to do in the best way possible.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And plus, I mean, if you know it, why not teach others, and why not make it into, I mean, would you call, I mean, let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
HEMA Strong is specifically built to be a community, yes?
It wasn't intended that way, but it certainly turned into that. Yes.
Oh, okay. Because it was, so I mean, it's also kind of a business, because you also teach classes and things like that as well.
I would say yes. It is set up like a business in that like we have some coaching clients to work on nutrition and coaching, but it's not something that we like super push. It's on the website,
Mhm.
but we rarely mention it. Where if like somebody's asking questions where it's like, okay, this person really needs some like specific detailed help, I'll offer it, but it's not like something that I push as like being sales oriented. It's more so like the community's here and we have extra help if you need it and the structure's in place, but it's not our focus. The community is like the number one focus.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make 100% sure, because the
Yeah.
community itself. And by the way, thank you for welcoming me to the community this morning.
Oh, you're welcome.
But the community itself seems more like it seems more like everybody's kind of helping each other, and it's a very like I wouldn't say close knit, but maybe I'm kind of a newcomer. Though what I found the most interesting, and you can probably speak to this better, is that it's a community for conditioning and nutrition and fitness, but I didn't find that it was completely controlled by like 4 or 5 fitness nuts. I think it's like it's not really one of those communities, right? It's not
Yeah.
so
That was very intentional. I'm not a fitness nut in that regard. I was never into like fitness or sports growing up. I used to be over like 400 pounds as an adult in my late 20s.
Mhm.
So I'm like a newcomer to fitness. So many of the things that are like gatekeepers to fitness, I wanted to make sure that those didn't exist here, because there's plenty of fitness groups if you just are interested in fitness, and they tend to be exclusive, and there's kind of some toxic atmospheres where if somebody posts like a video like, hey, how's my they don't even ask for like how's my form, they just post a video that's something they want to celebrate, and people like turn it into something negative, which is pretty much the internet in a nutshell, right? Like every YouTube video there's always somebody making some negative comment, and I wanted to kind of start from scratch doing the opposite of that, where someone can post a video and just have someone like internet high five them. And that was kind of like I don't know, I guess I hate using like the tech industry text of like disrupt the fitness industry, but I just wanted to have something different that would be someplace some people wanted to be a part of, as opposed to like I just go there for like just fitness advice, that type of thing.
Yeah, something that I love about it is like if someone posts a video and like someone offers like unsolicited advice, everyone is like, dude, don't do that.
Yeah.
It's in the rules.
It's great, but
Yeah.
I know, but I just love like everyone immediately like jumps on it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. And it's one of those things where like the rules came up after the fact, and it just became like what the community did. So it's almost like you were saying, like there's not one or two people that like control what the community is about. It's just everybody is like has the same feeling, and the rules kind of make sure that we keep that feeling, so it doesn't devolve into like what communities can over time.
So the next question I had was actually I'm gonna go off the cuff here because you brought something up that I thought was really interesting. So let me spin you an analogy and tell me if you agree or disagree, and give me your thoughts on it.
Okay.
We have said on many occasions that the gold medalist longsword fencer is not necessarily going to be the best longsword instructor. It's 2 different skills. So do you think that a fitness coach needs to be super fitness guy and needs to have like Adonis body?
I love that question. And that's something that the fitness industry, people that work in it full time, that's constantly a debate. I don't think so. So everybody has different genetics, right? That kind of allow them to operate within a certain body composition and fitness level.
Mhm.
So it really depends on what type of work someone's willing to put into it. Like I mentioned, like I went from having, being 400 pounds to having abs, but to me, it wasn't worth the trade-offs to be able to live like that.
Hard agree.
And I physically feel so much better, heavier than when I had, abs. So I think the important part is, can the person actually do it if they needed to do it? I mean, you still have to walk the walk in some ways, but that doesn't mean like you shouldn't take advice from somebody unless they're walking around with a six pack. It's not related to their knowledge per se, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we generally agree, and we kind of apply that logic to everything. Like, you don't need to be you don't need to be number one in the world to teach a really good longsword lesson. You don't need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in his 20s to tell us what to eat, right? Like,
Yeah,
and so,
exactly.
yeah, cool. So in that kind of same vein, why, if we're training longsword, if we're training HEMA in general, why should we be doing other fitness exercises? Like, what's the point? What's the benefit?
What's the point? That's a great question. I'm actually really glad you asked that. This is one of the things that I find myself talking about most often. So if I start rambling, you're welcome to cut me off or say, hey, get to the point. So strength training is the big one, right? And that it helps us with injury resilience, build stronger joints, basically just do the things we need to do in life a little bit easier. And my big thing is, when people ask me this question, is the fitter you are outside of HEMA training, the more you can actually get out of your HEMA training itself. And I don't mean just with like, I have enough cardio endurance to get through a class without falling over and needing to take a break every 5 minutes. Because I mean, that's a thing. And some people use HEMA for fitness, meaning it's an enjoyable workout that they want to do, and that's perfectly okay too. So I'm not poo-pooing anybody that wants to do that at all. But specifically training alongside HEMA, there are three big things. One is strength training helps with kinesthetic awareness, and that's just a fancy technical term to say understanding where your body is in space. And this helps you learn new movements better and faster. So if you're learning a technique, if you have better awareness of your body in space that comes from your strength training, you can better adapt to learning new techniques faster. And part of that is it gives you a way to better internalize external coaching cues. So if you have good body awareness and I say, throw your sword point forward with extension before you extend your hands, you better be able to internalize that external cue. So the second one is strength training develops muscular awareness, in that the mind-muscle connection you'd hear in other fitness spaces. And that makes internal cues more effective when you externalize them. So an example of that would be, okay, if you want to cut with force, you want to brace your core and you want to engage your hip as you step to put your entire body into the cut. If you have a strong mind-muscle connection, when you externalize that internal cue, you can feel yourself with that mind-muscle connection, engaging your core, squeezing your butt cheeks so that you engage your hip forward as you step. So those are like what things you can bring to HEMA training that strength training and other training can confer upon you. And another one of those would be building muscle. And building muscle has the big benefit of, hey, you look better in your HEMA fencing pants, you have a good HEMA butt, that there's confidence there, right? And then just some having more padding in certain areas can certainly help for higher impact training and sparring and things like that. And then more muscle gives you more storage for quick bursts of energy as well. So those are some big picture benefits. There's some nuance and things there, but that's kind of my big picture look at why would you train outside of HEMA to do better at HEMA.
I have to bring up the HEMA butt, because I think it was on a blog post or something that I read. One of the questions that you get asked a lot is, how do I make my butt look better in Pluderhose? And
yeah,
what do you even say? Like, what's the answer to that?
So actually, I'm 99% certain I wrote a blog post about this on HEMA Strong, and it really just kind of comes down to, I mean, it's funny because we're dealing with historical martial art, and people want to look good in their fencing pants and have HEMA butt, and then you have like the entire Instagram space of fitness, like that's literally what it's about, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be very much the same thing, as like focusing on movements that like squats and hip thrusts, barbell thrusts, things like that, lunges, that type of thing, to actually just add volume work to the butt muscles as far as that goes. And they're important for power generation too. So it's not just aesthetic.
Well, like, it's amazing to me because I actually sewed my own set of Pluderhosen, and I can tell you can't see a butt underneath there. Like you can't you
You know,
can't see anything.
That's funny though, because like that's when you can't. But like if you're doing like 14th century, that's going to be closer to tights,
Oh,
right?
that's
So
true,
and
yeah.
that's very much you can see everything in those,
You
right?
can see everything. Yeah.
There's nothing left to the imagination. So
Yes, I mean, I was gonna say also there's the whole codpiece thing, which is literally nothing left of the imagination. But
yeah,
So that's
the
when
imagination.
they're adding to the imagination there.
yeah.
oh man.
Well, hey, maybe that's the next generation of HEMA fencing pants, is they have room for padding in the butt if you want to enhance a little bit.
I was gonna say the spec. Oh yeah, you know the new spec pants actually have those like insertable pads that like Velcro onto the inside. So yeah, maybe you're
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
Oh man. Do you guys have any
Here
questions?
first.
Nathan, you've been so quiet.
I'm just listening.
Because like Nathan's like the fit
I'm just
one,
listening.
right?
I'm also. I don't know about that. I'm also very tired. We went on a morning bike ride, and I've been trying to split wood all afternoon, and splitting very fresh pine is not very easy. So I'm just kind of calm and relaxed and listening.
You want some unsolicited advice about how to split that wood? No, I'm just messing.
So I'll ask a question, which is I think an important one, because I know people hear this all the time in fitness industry, but in HEMA as well. With strength training, won't I become too big and muscular if I'm lifting weights?
Yes, and that I'm glad you asked that, because that was one of those myths that was one of the reasons why I was like, man, I really need to like start writing about this stuff. It's possible, right? But it doesn't just happen overnight. Like so many people are like, aren't I going to get big and bulky? You may be somebody that's genetically predisposed to do that, but it's not going to happen in the blink of an eye. You'll know before it's a problem for the most part. And it's something that still requires hard work and eating in a way that's conducive to doing that. But that said, just because you're adding muscle and strength doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be slower. In fact, you may actually be faster. Yes, weighing more can reduce your speed, but it doesn't have to, depending on how you train. Like, for example, Usain Bolt, fastest human being on the planet, right? He does Olympic lifting and he does things like power cleans to augment his running routine. So it's not like and that was the big thing, was like every single high level elite athlete does strength training for the reasons I mentioned: injury resilience and explosive power. And that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, doing strength training, I started kind of with like a powerlifting kind of approach, and I was focusing on like the big, 3 lifts. And it was interesting because at first, like up to a certain point, there was definitely a benefit to my fencing, but then I got to a point where the training load was too much and the weight was too heavy, and it was getting to a point where my fencing was now going down because I was just tired out from all the weight, but also the weight I was lifting was too much for me to recover from.
Exactly. Yeah. There's an inflection point, I think, where at some point the strength training is going to add to your fencing, but once you reach that inflection point, it's going to take away.
Right.
From what I've seen, there's 2 groups of people. There are people that are like, heck yeah, I want to strength train to get better at fencing. And they'll start there and maybe not understand or have a good objective viewpoint of where that inflection point is. And you have the other half of people that want to start with the specialization first and never start with the basics of strength training and maybe cardio development. And then they're wondering why they're getting injured and like it's not improving their fencing as much as it could be. So it's kind of like, if I could do this, I'd love the buddy system where you just kind of swap those people's training temporarily. Like find a partner that's doing the opposite of what you're doing and just switch each other's training and then come back and switch again later.
Oh, interesting. Huh. So, also I should probably, when you say like David mentioned the 3 big lifts and like strength training in general, can we kind of define what we're talking about there? Are we talking about specifically weightlifting or like, plyometric strength training? Like what are you generally talking about?
What am I talking about, or what was David talking about?
You first, and then David.
Okay. All right. So the big three lifts you find in powerlifting are bench, squat, and deadlift.
Mhm.
So that usually brings, when people hear that, they think barbell lifts, right? But those are specific exercises done in a specific way. When I'm talking about what exercises I recommend, it's more so about movement patterns, right? Our bodies move in a certain way that we can look at. We squat down, right? And that doesn't necessarily need to be barbell. It could be hundreds of variations, body weight variations, picking up objects around you like a sandbag or anything like that. A bench press would just be horizontal push, right? Just pushing forward or pushing overhead. A deadlift is just hinging at your hip. So these are things your body does naturally, and these are just different ways to increase like a load on them, right? Give them resistance with which they can adapt against. So one of the things I found, one of the myths that I was coming against was like, you have to do deadlifts or you have to just do push-ups. Those are just tools to do work, right? It's just a movement pattern. Just like with HEMA, right? A weapon is just a tool. The thing that the person is what matters, right? And there are so much more that matters other than the weapon, right? It's your timing, it's your footwork, it's your distance management. Like those things are, regardless of what you're fencing with, those things matter more than the weapon itself.
Mm.
So it's the same way I view the movement pattern. So if I say deadlift, it doesn't have to be a barbell deadlift. It could be with dumbbells, it could be with a medicine ball, it could be just with your body, it could be with anything. It's the movement pattern itself is what matters.
Gotcha. David, did you have anything to add to that, since you're
No.
more?
No, I mean, that's basically like when I first started, I was doing like the barbell deadlifts, squat, bench press, also overhead press, and I still do that, but I've now I vary up what I'm doing much more with different. There's just so many different variations, and just body weight and kettlebell and all sorts of just different variations, like Chuck had said, and that's, I found, has been much more useful than just focusing purely on just trying to get as strong as possible. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not my goal. Is not to be able to just lift as much weight as I possibly can. My goal is to be as fast and strong as I can.
Yeah, like, so I would say, and I kind of brought up plyometrics, but maybe we can touch on it now a little bit, because in sport fencing specifically, a lot of the training that goes into sport fencing is specifically plyometrics. Like, you jump on one leg kind of deal. You were looking for that explosive power, whereas I think you guys were kind of talking more about like slow lift, right? Is that
so? So the way that I would explain that is that there are different fitness domains or attributes that our body has, and they are related to the energy systems we have in our body, right? We have like an energy system that can produce force for 3 to 5 seconds, right? And that uses one type of energy. And then after that, it switches over to a different type of energy, and it's something you can sustainably do for up to 2 minutes.
Mm.
And then there's another energy system that is like for your long term, something you could do for hours in a row, right? And there are different attributes that are mixtures of those. So when you mention plyometrics,
Yeah.
It's a combination of strength and endurance. So it's the ability to do some movement repeatedly over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have just raw absolute strength, it doesn't necessarily have to be slow per se. I personally, in my training, if I'm doing barbell movements for raw strength, I use bar speed as an indicator of fatigue. So if my movement starts slowing down, I'm starting to push my fatigue line of like what we talked about. Once you reach a certain level of strength, doing more takes away from other things, right? So like the bar speed to me is an indicator of like, all right, the bar's slowing down, you're done with this for the day. Like that's how I know it. And it takes some time and practice to get used to that, but lifting heavy does not necessarily mean slow. And that's kind of where that becomes a goal in and of itself. Like big lifts that are like 1 rep, that can be slow. And that's where it starts to become an entirely different goal than what I would consider strength training for HEMA.
Cool. So continuing on that same topic, the other question that kind of popped up in my head was training with weighted swords, like differently weighted swords. I think I asked another guest about this, but I can't honestly remember their answer. But training with like a super heavy sword versus a sword that's lighter than your own sword. Are there any like real benefits to that, or like, you know, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think the answer is on a spectrum between historical precedents and what we know from modern sports science. There is a bunch of historical precedents for training with heavier implements back to like what the Romans had, training with heavier swords. I think Degrassi did the opposite. You start lighter and build up. And I think that might be a little bit closer to what modern sports science would say is okay. But I think the idea of training heavy as possible and fighting light is like, I guess the question is, what's the goal? Meaning there are much more time efficient ways to get stronger at something that carry over to swordplay. And my personal experience, and we have studies that kind of looked at what baseball did with weighted bats and things like that. The only time that baseball players were using weighted bats where it was a positive effect were during warm-ups, but the vast majority of the time spent in these studies, if they used heavier equipment and then played a game with lighter equipment, their response times are worse. So there is a place for it, but it's not necessarily training heavier all the time and then using a lighter weapon, because it's going to throw off your muscle memory and your timing. And then you kind of get into the heavier, lighter preference. Even being as strong as I am, and I'm not. There's plenty of people, especially in the Human Strong community, that's stronger than I am. I prefer a lighter sword and a shorter sword for myself. It's just the style of fighting that I prefer, anyways. So,
well, you'll fit in here just fine.
Okay.
Actually, no, and it's interesting because I'm a baseball guy. I used to play collegiate baseball. But one of the things that we did talk about was that study that you mentioned, and when you say warm up, it's actually even more like condensed than that. I believe it was literally practice swings right before you go up to bat.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's like you do the weight and then you go in and you're like, oh, hey, this is really light. Or like a pitcher sometimes will use like a weighted ball, but they even stopped that practice because like a pitching is kind of an endurance game. And so sure, it makes like the first like 6 pitches faster. Yay. But you're going to pitch 100 pitches throughout the game.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. There's connecting it back to strength training. There's I think loaded isometrics is an equivalent. Like, for example, if take a deadlift and you load up a deadlift heavier than you can actually lift, and you attempt to pull that weight from the floor and you can't move it, but you're giving it all you got. It certainly works from a nervous system point of view. Like, you're priming your nervous system to the point where then when you use a weight you can normally work with, it feels much lighter. So I'd probably want to explore that concept a little bit. Maybe, like, for example, I don't know, doing montante drills prior to your longsword class to see how that helps you with feeling it. But as long as it's not like an extensive training, I think that is probably worth exploring.
Yeah. So actually, I'll add my anecdotal evidence to this. When I was pitching, which was very, very short time because I'm not a tall guy. When I was pitching, or when I was throwing, when you use a weighted ball and then you throw it and then you go back to the regular like 9-ounce ball, it feels like a wiffle ball in your hand. And a lot of pitchers will actually injure themselves. And I know exactly how that happens, because when you feel the wiffle ball and you're used to making the same motion, what ends up happening is you just can't control the stop. Like, you can't control to stop your arm and your arm just keeps going. Or my least favorite thing in the world, I don't know if you've ever seen a video of this or seen it happen to somebody, but a pitcher will go to throw a ball and their arm will just break. It is a horrendous thing that it has not happened to me, but I have seen it happen, and it is, oh, you don't want that.
Yeah.
So
I got
oh yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
So Chuck, if I remember at the beginning of the episode, you were saying that you run the beginners program for Broken Plow, right?
Yep.
So what kind of fitness regimen, routine, strength training, cardio, plyometrics, all that stuff do you guys generally do for beginners?
So prior to me coming in and being in charge of that, and I'm also in charge of warm-ups for the club, the warm-ups themselves used to be a workout in and of themselves. And knowing that for beginners, some people would come to HEMA and have no fitness background, and that was pushing people away. So I put into place some very simple warm-ups that just got all the joints moving, and the for any fitness endeavor, the point of a warm-up is literally just to be warm, so that your joints and your ligaments and things like that are not just trying to do movement without having blood flow to them. So I did away with any type of classes or warm-ups that were like super intensive, and we've separated those out. So like, for example, the beginning warm-up is the other thing I tried to do was have a sword in hand for most of it. So we would do like shoulder arounds, but would do it with a sword. And then we would do some things like what are they called? Russian twists. We call them German twists. So we just have it's a twist. Instead of like a medicine ball, we have the sword fully extended to the sides, right? So it's just getting the body moving in movement patterns you'd be using in your class, using the sword as much as possible. So like squats, you could take a high guard or a low guard, depending. Knowing that the farther the sword away is from you, the harder the squat's going to be because it's weight in front of you. So things like that, just different ways to do body movements and increase the challenge slightly based on fitness levels, but without it being a workout. And then we'll do things like sometimes we'll do something like we'll just go through the different guard transitions while doing footwork at still having the sword in hand, and increasing speed as people are proficient. And then we just pretty much start class by doing some cuts and things like that. So we do have different classes, and people are made aware of ahead of time where the focus is not going to be technique, because the last thing I wanted to do is have people tired and sloppy when they're learning a technique would impact their muscle memory. So that way we separated those out. So if we have a class that's more fitness oriented, and that's when we would do things like not really warm up in the same way and would not have any technique work. So we will have classes that are like, shuttle runs and different stations around our training area that you can, like for example, a PEL sparring area, things like that. So we still have those classes. We just separate them as much as possible from technique work.
So something that you mentioned has kind of led to another question. I've heard before from people who do like shooting sports, archery in particular, not really like riflery or anything, and also from people who do HEMA as well, that like when you're tired, you have less energy to burn and expend, and your body knows that, and so you tend to make more energy efficient motions and actions and stuff like that. Is that true? And like, if it is there merit in doing a thing to make yourself tired and then doing technique exercises?
Yes, but no. That's definitely a thing, right? Being able to train at a high level under various conditions is important. But I think it would be one of those things where you don't start with that. Like if you already know it, if you know a technique well enough and you want to be able to perform that technique in a various amount of fatigue states, then you should probably train specifically that way once you feel comfortable doing it when you're not fatigued. So as long as you're not entrenching those errors to your muscle memory, I think is the key difference as far as that goes.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Cool.
Yep.
All right, so then let's move on to nutrition, because Chuck is a professional nutritionist, which is awesome, and something that I think really gets missed. Like, we definitely do some strength training in most HEMA schools. I would say they do some form of it, but I think you're very unique in that you also include nutrition information. So to start off, what kind of benefits are there to proper nutrition for HEMA specifically, and what does it even mean to have proper nutrition?
Well, that's a minefield of a question.
Sorry.
No, I expected it, right? But so proper nutrition, there is this difference between what allows you to survive and then what allows you to thrive. Mm-hmm. And every person has some differences, and it's based on kind of like their environment, their upbringing, their genetics as to what those things mean. But essentially it's, do you have enough energy in a day to do all the things you need to do? And do you have the right balance of nutrients, be they macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbs, to repair your body from whatever it's going through in a given day? And then do you have enough vitamins and minerals to actually feel good and support all the hormonal processes the body's going through? So those needs differ on an individual basis, but essentially, if you want to take it down, like, what do you need to not die, right? You can't live without food for more than 3 weeks, but to actually survive, you need a minimum amount of protein. And an easy way to simplify this, and again, this is a simplification, your muscles are made out of protein, right? Your body fat and organs are made out of protein and fat, and your brain is made out of fat. And then carbohydrates fill up your muscles, mixed with water, and that provides you fast energy. So like the stuff you eat actually turns into tissues in your body. So that's like why we need a mixture of nutrients. There are no good or bad nutrients. You need all of them in varying amounts, but each individual person has different needs as far as that goes. So that's like the basics of what you need to survive. And then you kind of have what is optimal, and your lifestyle, as far as how much sleep you get, anything you're doing as far as activity, everybody's needs will start to differ based on that. Cool. So proper nutrition is not like a good, I get this every day, all day long at work, is that people come in and are like, oh, well, I had pizza, I was bad. And even being the HEMA nutrition guy, sometimes will be at tournaments, and I feel like a Catholic priest sometimes, where people are like confessing, like, I just ordered pizza after my pools, and I'm like, can I have a slice? Like, what are you telling me for?
I love it.
Yeah, so it's like everybody tends to have part of it is the fitness industry in general and advertising and all that stuff. This like black or white, all or nothing view of what food is, and it's just food. There are very few examples of something that's actually bad for you. So when I talk about nutrition, I just say that we have certain needs, and there's enough wiggle room for most people to include things that are traditionally like would be viewed as like bad foods. But if having those things in your day-to-day life allow you to also meet what you need for nutrient wise, then I would consider that good nutrition.
Interesting. So you said there's a few actual bad foods. Can you name one?
Well, just off the top of my head, like some of the what do they call it? The manufacture what? Peeps? No.
Peeps.
It's candy corn.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
Candy corn, that's a good one.
And pineapples on pizza.
Candy corn, delicious.
And pineapple.
I'm just kidding. I'm not. I like pineapple on pizza. I hope I don't turn off any listeners. But no. So like a bad food would be artificial trans fats. We know that they directly cause heart issues. So foods that have artificial trans fats are bad. Like there's no way around that. And then alcohol is another one. And I know that's polarizing in HEMA. And I'm a craft.
Well, it's funny because it shouldn't be polarizing because it's science, right? Like it's really basic. It's like, yeah, everyone loves to slowly poison themselves after tournaments. Like that's just what we do.
Yeah.
And it feels.
Why is that polarizing?
Right? Like you should know what you're doing. You're poisoning yourself just a little bit.
Well, so I asked what are like the most common diets that people have as like a poll in HEMA Strong, and like one of them was just like meat and whiskey. That's like the best diet for HEMA. So I mean, and that's really it. But it's one of those things where like it's not like it's funny because people are like, well, why is alcohol bad, right? Well, it has calories. It's technically has no nutrition, and the body views it as a metabolic poison. So all the other things get turned off in your body, like your digestion system stops to process the alcohol. And yeah, it's it has positive effects too. But the biggest one is sleep, how it affects your sleep cycles. So every time I bring this up, I'm very hesitant to do it because people are like, "Are you suggesting day drinking then?" And I'm just like, no.
Yeah, but it's so funny because I've heard that one before where it's like, man, we all drink alcohol at night, but what we should really be doing is drinking it in the morning. And it's like, well, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. So those would be the only things that are considered bad. But then again, I do think if you have it in moderation, it can be part of a healthy diet.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So, and I think it's also like on a varying scale, right? There are certain alcohol, like I will be the first to admit I like wine probably more than beer, but I also think that wine is probably a little bit better for you than beer. And I also noticed, specifically you talked about sleep. If I have wine, my sleep gets messed up. So I
Yep.
don't like to do that. But I have found that mead doesn't mess up my sleep cycle as much, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah. But
Two things.
what?
Go ahead, Colin.
No, go ahead, Mr. Mead Maker.
No. It has nothing to do with me. The first thing was, is there a way that you can like cut the clips so that it sounds like Chuck is saying that alcohol is part of a healthy diet and not say the in moderation part? Just take that out.
Yes, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna put it right here. Okay.
Yes.
No, I won't do that because he has like an actual business around nutrition. I don't want to ruin his business.
No, so it's fine. It's not going to matter. Well, as you might imagine, I currently talk to people all day long that are drinking and trying to lose weight, as you know, most of my clients or whatever. So it's not like it would be a foreign thing to hear me say that, because I drink as well, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that I was going to say is it's interesting that you had mentioned alcohol, because even in moderation, I noticed that whenever I'm trying to cut weight, like I look at the scale, I'm like, oh God, like I'm like 8 pounds heavier than I want to be or whatever, and it's better to address it then than wait until it's 20 pounds, right? If I just stop drinking for a week, it shoots back down, and it takes a long time for it to come back up, and it like. I don't understand the science behind it, because I mean, like calories are calories. That is true. But even if I sub those calories for calories of like some sort of like a soda or a Coke or something like that, then, I still have the weight loss effect in the same way. And maybe it's because of how it affects sleep, or maybe it's because, like you say, like everything turns off in the body and like all that stuff gets put on a halt or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so the three things that impact our metabolism are, well, the foods we eat, right? Some foods take more energy to digest, like more heavier protein foods take more energy to digest. Sleep actually impacts our metabolism. The heavier, deeper sleep you get, your metabolism does better. So that could have been a factor. There could have been some like inflammation from the alcohol that was just being released. And then the other factor, like the biggest thing we can actually change about our metabolisms is how active we are. And I don't mean in like scheduled exercise, but as far as number of steps in a day, that has probably the biggest impact on our metabolism, and alcohol can impact that. When you look at like competition bodybuilders who are dieting down to like almost like the edge of gonna die, their non-exercise activity levels plummet, and it manifests in talking slower, blinking less often, and all that stuff over the course of a day adds up more than actually going out and doing scheduled exercise when it comes to like the amount of energy you use. So like actual exercise, like I see it all the time where people are like, oh, well, my treadmill said that I burned 100 calories doing this. That doesn't take into account what you would have burned just being alive. So that's where people like get into trouble, where like, I burned 100 calories, I can eat 100 more calories. But no, like that 100 calories includes what you would have burned just standing there too. So it's we actually don't really burn that many calories being active unless we're like high level elite athletes. And that's where we start to see differences, where like those people are like almost a different species of like how they burn through energy and things like that.
It's funny that you say that, because I remember coming across, it wasn't really like a full article or anything like that, but it was just like a little quip a number of years ago, and it was basically saying that people who suffer from restless leg syndrome tend to have higher metabolisms and tend to burn more calories than people who don't. And like that's just such a weird thing to read. But like you're constantly moving these little motions all day long.
That's what it is. That stuff just adds up big time.
That's me. That's 100% me.
Yep.
Let's oh, sorry, did you have something, David?
Yeah, I was just saying, so talking about nutrition, what about, like competition day, like the night before and day of, what should I eat?
Ooh, carb loading.
Yes. So carb loading, it's aside from people that are like super power athletes, elite level, because the way we have energy on demand for the like, for example, a fencing bout, you have like what, 2 to 3 minutes tops between exchanges. That's going to be our stored carbohydrates. Most people cannot burn through all the things they've stored in a day, no matter how hard they go, right? Except for Olympic level athletes, they can burn through their stored carbohydrates in minutes. And that's the difference that I was kind of saying. So for most people, I'm going to guess like 99% of HEMA, right? The meal you eat for dinner is what will be fueling you the day of the tournament. But it doesn't necessarily need to be carb loading, for the biggest reason being that the biggest reason why people feel like crap during a tournament is anything that impacts their digestive system, like gastric distress. Some of that's probably pre-tournament jitters, anxiety, stress. And what happens is once that hits you, we have fight or flight on our nervous system. As we talked about, alcohol turns off the digestive system, so does fight, right? That gets turned off. All your energy is being channeled to survive. So any food you ate, like with a heavy breakfast, is going to be sloshing around in there. And if you carb loaded the night before, our digestion is not fast enough to go from a big, huge, heavy meal at like 6, 7 p.m. And if you're fencing at 9 a.m., that food is just going to be bouncing around in you nonstop. So what I generally would recommend is still eat your normal foods. Don't try any new foods, and then just have a regular sized meal with, starchy carbohydrates, a decent amount of fat, because that does help digestion as well. And then, some protein. It doesn't have to be anything like it doesn't have to be like a chicken salad, right? It could just be your normal meal that if you're getting it at a restaurant or whatever, it's perfectly fine, just as long as it's balanced. And then beforehand, it's really like, what do you feel best normally eating? Like in the morning, it might be like oatmeal or something like that. If you're at a hotel, like what's available. And then again, just keeping in mind, the biggest thing is you have everything you need in your body to make it through an entire day of activity. Most of what will happen fatigue wise is psychological. And there have been a bunch of recent studies about this and, what people actually need. So I would, once you've taken care of like the night before and maybe what your breakfast is going to be, just focus on things that are not going to upset your stomach. So that just might even be liquid food, or even like, a lot of people like to eat candy. And I think that's good just to give you some burst of energy just with the sugar, because you're just going to be burning through it anyways. So like I've seen people do like a protein shake with some Gatorade mixed in, and then just some fruit, sugar, stuff like that, just to just keep the energy coming in.
Yeah. I was just going to say, for like the morning of a tournament, I can't eat. Like adrenaline, I lose like any appetite, and food actually makes me like nauseous. So usually it's a protein, protein shake or something like that is the only thing I can like drink or take in and not feel like crap.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly okay. I deal with a lot of like CrossFit athletes too. So what I normally see is people are so concerned like what they do the day of, but nutrition is not this like in and out exchange in one day, because of digestion times and the way the tissue exchange happens, meaning like you're always constantly moving fat out of fat cells and carbohydrates out of muscle tissue. Is like what you do the week up to that day is probably more important than what you're doing that day in and of itself. So like staying hydrated the whole week, you can't hydrate an hour before, right? You have to be a good hydration status, a good nutrition status, feeling good all leading up to it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, my question was going to be, in that case then, there's a lot of like fad diets, because we're Americans, and one thing that we love is fad diets. But are any of them actually good, and what kind of diet for not necessarily a tournament, but like HEMA training? What kind of diets do you generally look at? Like mixture of protein, carbs, etc.
So a lot of that is the one word answer is sometimes it's more about what's eating you. And what I mean by that is like how do you actually feel eating certain foods? Yeah. So I could tell somebody that just genetically or the way their taste buds develop, like, oh yeah, like you should eat a lot of carbs and lower fat, because that's typically what leads to better athletic performance. If they don't digest carbohydrates well and they just feel like crap doing it, then that's not going to work for them. If you just look at like a blanket statement of like what is the best diet for health, but also remembering my statement about like you still have to fit in things that allow you to maintain that. So like the caveat is like whichever one you can stick with. But if you're just looking at a blanket statement of like what is best for health and performance, probably something with like Mediterranean style, where it's like you have lean proteins, you have healthy fats that come from like olive oil, fruits, and lots of veggies and things like that. It is probably your best bet. But I think that's probably kind of a cop-out answer as well, because that's pretty much kind of like how people ate 100 years ago anyways, for the most
historical.
part, right? Yeah. So, I think, and I work with people that come to me and have tried every fad diet in the world, and they're like, all right, well, what's the answer? So I set them up with, this is your carb goal, this is your fat goal, this is your protein goal. And they're like, well, what do I eat? I'm like, well, let's go look back over all of the fad diets you've tried. What actually worked from each one of those? Like, just because it's a fad diet doesn't mean there aren't some positive qualities or choices that you found were helpful to you. Like, what foods did you feel best eating? And let's take all of those from the different pieces you've tried and smash them together and then see how you feel.
Yeah.
It's very much an experimentation process.
I really like that answer, because I was definitely the guy that tried a bunch of like really dumb fad diets. Every once in a while I will do a Whole30 that will generally work, but I think most of it's just that I don't drink alcohol for 30 days. It's probably 90% of it, but I think I've kind of settled on this like Mediterranean kind of deal, which seems to work for me. But I love that it's like you need to find out what works for you. That's like the kind of thing where I hear that and I'm like, great, you know what you're talking about. Because if I have to see one more infomercial or one more fad diet that's promising me weight loss, I'm gonna lose it, man. I'm gonna lose it.
Yep. I know exactly what that's like. I would say the only probable exception is, and there's a explanation, is something like the carnivore diet. So people will, if you're not sure what the carnivore diet is, it's basically only eating meat. And the problem with that is, so people have felt really good doing that because basically all the gut bacteria that digest certain foods kind of die off, and different gut bacteria that digest meat come into play. So they may have had a single food intolerance, and simply cutting out that food that they were intolerant to and replacing it with something else would have had the same effect. But now they used a shotgun approach and they eliminated a bunch of things that they would have felt fine eating, but they're also missing out on a bunch of nutrients and vitamins and minerals and all that stuff. So it's kind of like they feel better because they eliminated something. They just don't know what it is because they eliminated everything.
Yeah, I
that's my only warning.
I would feel bad for the person who eliminated everything and went to a carnivore diet, and it's like, oh, meat was my trigger.
Yeah, which is possible. Yeah, so that's definitely possible.
Oh man.
I have some questions or some things kind of going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier. If you want to do that. So you talked about like with your beginning classes with, having a certain level of like, warm up versus like workout. And I don't know, I personally, I hate working out when I'm fencing because I'm there to fence and to train. And I do my working out outside of class, right? But when I'm teaching, a lot of my students do literally zero physical activity or zero training outside of class. So I guess my question is how do I encourage my students to do that, to train and to do this outside of class? Because I can have them do exercises in the class, right? But I think I found it's like hard to get them to understand that they need to be doing this outside of fencing class.
That's a tough one because you can't really make anybody do anything
right.
they don't want to do. So you'll get the students right where they're asking questions and they want to do it. I think the only way to do it where you're kind of getting everybody to do it is make it about a sense of community. It doesn't have to be like a competition, but like just having maybe like a Facebook group or a Discord channel where people can like talk about their workouts together, and just like, hey, we're going to do like at home work. We're going to do some footwork drills, and then we're going to do like push-ups. So like everybody do this and like post what you did to like see how you're doing, so we can keep track of how your progress is. And you just make it optional, because if you force people to do something, that's probably going to be the start of them not doing it immediately. And then, you know, if maybe doing it at the end of class just to like introduce the concept, and like it might just be that people don't actually know what to do as far as that goes, meaning like push-up form might be an issue. It just might be that they just need a gentle introduction to what to do in a way that they can fit it into their lives without feeling like torture. Because I mean, like I said, with my background, all my attempts at fitness prior to finding weight training just felt like torture, and I hated every second of it. And then when I finally found something that clicked, it was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. So a lot of people have not gotten to that point yet. So maybe just kind of steering them to something that you can help them with in class, and then they can take it home and refine it and then come back with questions would probably be the best way to do it, I think.
Interesting. So would you maybe recommend like not like a blanket introductory, but like an introductory class where you teach like a basic hemo workout and say, you can keep doing this and build off of it and find out what works, but like, here it is on paper for you to take home?
Yeah, I actually do provide that to my students that ask, and it's body weight based. So it's, people think calisthenics equals body weight, but what we talked about the fitness domains was you have like strength, endurance. So if you take somebody that can't do 10 push-ups, doing 5 push-ups is strength work. It's going to be resistance, and it's going to be get them stronger over time. But if you take somebody that can do 100 push-ups without stopping, them doing 10 push-ups is like yawning, right? So the only way to get somebody stronger is to change up the workout. So I have a system that I share with my students where it's like, all right, if you can do this many push-ups, we need a harder variation. Or if you can't do a push-up, we needed a variation that's more suited to your level. So I have levels, like the baseline is this. What I've tried to do is make the baseline the one that anybody can do, and then I build up to like a regular push-up, and then we go things like feet elevated, one hand, that type of stuff. So that way it's not just endurance work. I mean, endurance work is important, but I think most people that don't have any fitness background will get more benefit from the actual strength training, because then you're progressing. It's not just a single number on a single exercise increasing and then eventually plateauing, and then there's nowhere to go from there.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, guys, we are at an hour now. So any last questions before we go?
I do have one, because my wife will kill me if I don't ask this. So I know we talked a little bit earlier about like getting, bulky from lifting, and I know that's a huge fear for a lot of women who are afraid that if I lift weights, I'm going to get bulky. How I guess how much of a myth is that?
It's possible for women to get bulky, but it's less likely. Testosterone is a huge factor in that, and you have to train and eat in a certain way. To order to add bulk, you have to eat and gain weight, and that usually is kind of the limiter as far as that goes. And then the training type, like actually adding muscle mass, usually requires a rep range above 5 reps. So there are plenty of strong people out there that have continued to get stronger and stronger and stronger and not gotten any larger, because primarily, yes, it's muscle strength, but it's mostly like reps around 5 are going to be nervous system development, and that's right, where the training has a certain goal, and it's not necessarily going to add muscle mass.
Interesting. So you maybe I'll paraphrase, but essentially what you're saying is it's really hard to get bulky by accident.
Yes. Anybody that ends up being bulky by accident has been genetically gifted, and they probably could put that into a career that pays for people that are genetically gifted to be like that. So
yeah, I mean, when I I got up to 405 deadlift, and I don't know if I got any larger. I mean, there's some initial muscle growth, but I mean, after that, and like squatting, like there's some initial, like quad growth, but it's not like even squatting heavy. It's not like I had a really hard time adding muscle.
Right. So the guy that is helped me bring like coaching services to Hema Strong, and he makes a lot of the videos for us, Michael Adams. I had a chance to go hang out with him in Edmonton, Canada. Yeah, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And he's, I think he's like 5'7", 5'8", and he's about 150 pounds. He deadlifts like almost 4 times his body weight. Like he's approaching 600-pound deadlift, and he doesn't look, if with the regular clothes on, he just looks like a normal person. Like he doesn't look like a fitness mutant or anything. Like he's not like one of those Ninja Turtle body lifters where they So it's like it's very possible that the way you're training you can get much stronger without actually adding physical size. There is some carryover, but they are 2 distinct goals generally.
Yeah, my wife has like the opposite problem. She can't. She finds it incredibly difficult to eat enough in order to put on any muscle.
Yeah.
So she was like, when she left, she had does get stronger, but she has a really hard time actually adding any muscle on, just because she literally cannot eat enough to really be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's definitely a problem. I've worked with some female clients that they've gotten to a certain body composition and they wanted to add muscle mass, and we were talking about like metabolism and how like movement and things adapt, where some people, when you feed them more, their metabolism revs up and revs up and revs up. I had a woman that I think she was like 5'6", 125 pounds. I had her eating like 4,000 calories and she just kept losing weight. Like I was like, you need to eat rice and pour honey all over it. Like there's no other way we can get this energy into you. And like, you're just gonna have to be eating like cookies and cupcakes, or we just can't keep up with your energy needs. But I mean, she was training weightlifting 5 days a week and running, and she was very muscular at that point. So her metabolism was like at an all-time high. And the more energy we put into her, the more energy came out. So it was like genetic differences. If you did the same thing to me, I would just like want to go nap the whole time. Like I'd basically become a panda bear, right? So it's like the genetic differences are like astounding as to what happens. So.
Well, actually, that brings up an important question, because you have tons of different clients. Do you actually change any sort of fitness routines based on gender, or is it mostly just based on body weight?
It's mostly based on body weight, and different activities and goals and things like that. There are some differences between the sexes as far as training needs. It's not something I'm super knowledgeable about, but if you're interested, there's someone named Greg Nuckols. He writes, I think it's called Stronger by Science is his blog. And that's actually was his dissertation for his master's degree, was the training differences between sexes.
Cool.
So that's, if you want to, I don't want to speak to it because it's not something I'm super versed in.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Nathan, do you have any last questions?
No, I don't think so.
Oh man.
This is just to go back. It's not a question. It's not a question, but just to go back earlier, because we were talking about like weighted training weapons.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there are multiple, like the sources disagree about it. Like they'll say one thing, and I know like in the 19th century, I believe like a lot of the saber manuals, like they'll like one person will say, okay, you need to use a heavier saber because when then you fence, it's easier. And then like there's another manual that's written a little after that who's talking trash about the other guys, saying, no, this is stupid. You have to use a lightsaber because if you use a heavy saber, you're going to destroy your joints.
A lightsaber?
A lightsaber, yeah. And then I think it's Alfieri who says, training for, I think it's Alfieri, for training for rapier. In order to train for rapier, you need to do spadone and wrestle.
Since you mentioned that, I'm wondering if that's the nuances between the differences in sources is that we have a scientific explanation and we have other methods to train those things. And if we have time, I don't have a time limit. If you guys are cool staying on, one thing I wanted to touch on was like historical training, and that this kind of ties into that. If you don't mind.
Yeah, well, we could broach historical training. Why not?
Okay, so like the previously any physical training did not have the scientific concept of progressive resistance in a sustainable way. So, we had ways like that. So if a saberist, a classical saberist, wanted to have stronger wrists, maybe that was the only way they could figure out to do it, was use a heavier saber, and that way maybe the deficit in their physical being or what physicality was their wrist and forearm strength, and that was what they needed to do. So maybe that particular author was writing to address that through that lens. And that's kind of how I'm kind of viewing those things. But as far as historical training, this is something I've started to dive into a little bit more, because that's something that somebody asks about once a month, is like, well, how do I, this isn't historical, right? So how do I actually train in a historical way? How would a knight have trained in a historical way? So there's somebody that's doing a bunch of research into this. His name is Arturo Camargo, I think his name is, and he wrote a great write up on the blog. I think it's, I don't know how everybody pronounces HROR. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah,
So
you have to say it like you're Chewbacca.
Okay. So there's a great write-up on there about like what we actually know from sources about training historically for fitness or to support, fencing. So it's basically all over the place, right? Like you mentioned, there's different sources that disagree. We have the Romans that trained a certain way. They did use heavier weapons. And then there's different insights as to like what people ate for training. Like Talhofer says, don't eat too much fat. But if you look at the commonalities between all of these sources, there's some things that stick out. And you have things like throwing and pushing stones. That's a big one, right? You have dancing is in there, jumping, wrestling is obviously in there, right? As wrestling is the foundation of the art, right? And then you have things like swimming, and then fencing itself, and things like being able to jump and leap over things. All those are commonalities in there. And recently, it was, well, I say recently, but it's almost been a year. But it was fall of 2019. Charles Lynn did a seminar in person that was taking all of these sources that we have that have these historic ways to train and trying it just in a group format. And I went to it because I wanted to come and apply the modern fitness lens to see what kind of stuck out. I didn't influence it in any way, and he only looked at it from a historical point of view. So like, for example, where we might look at, hey, weightlifting, I got X number of reps for so many sets at this weight. Historical people wouldn't have done it like that. They didn't have that concept. They would just say, hey, look, I picked this stone up and I threw it. And then, okay, well, hey, can you throw it farther than me? So it kind of like became, it wasn't competitive in the same way, like down to the wire. So some of the things that kind of stuck out from that was that there are all these things that we do similarly. So when I approach coaching for HEMA, most people don't have a way to like go and throw stones and find stones that are perfect for throwing, but you see that in modern sport, like Germany or in Sweden, I think have Steintossen, which is just almost like a strongman sport for throwing stones, right? You have the Highland Games, which were like the grandparent of track and field in the Olympics. They throw stones and things like that. They throw hammers and all kinds of things. So there's still, those things still exist. But the modern equivalent would be like, hey, if somebody wants to get more explosive, I would have them throw medicine balls, right? I would have them leap and jump rope and things like that. I would have them carry weights like in a farmer's walk, but it's the same thing as like picking up a wheelbarrow, where that's like one of the best things you can do is actually just pick up a weight in a way that your body is able to effectively move weight from one place to another. And then when I started thinking about it, like all of this stuff is the same. The only difference is like modern fitness has the science of how it works and how we apply progressive overload and how we train one thing without taking away from something else. So I think the new Army combat fitness test is kind of like the combination of those things, right? It has all the same stuff. It has a medicine ball throw, it has deadlifts, it has push-ups, it has a timed run, it has pushing, carrying stuff, dragging stuff. So it's like, it's interesting to me that like all of this stuff is the same thing that it's been for like 700 years, but the only real differences we have are how we fit that training in around other things. So I found that incredibly fascinating. Like I said, this is something that I've like always had a way to answer, but other people kind of gave me that insight and perspective as to how I can answer it.
Cool. Yeah, actually, I think I saw that you had a blog post on it, and I actually put it in the notes to broach it. So I'm glad that you reminded me, because this is another topic that, like, we're history nerds, right? Like, this is literally what we're doing here. So we should always talk about the historical.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to talk about it because, you know, before the pandemic happened, I had all these grand plans of getting into harness, and, you know, there's all those joke videos of people training in harness in the gym. But I wanted to like start doing like live videos of me training in harness, but you know, the pandemic kind of threw all my plans out the window. But yeah. That's kind of where I was going with that.
Actually, we had a really cool talk with Bill Grandy about getting into harness and how best to do it, and don't pick anything past like the year 1500 for your time period, because because I did, and I was looking at a harness that was like 20 grand. Like, no, that's not happening. But we also had a really cool talk with Jean Henry Chandler, who specifically talked about the training that they would do in the medieval and early Renaissance times that was just based on games. Like, they didn't have there wasn't like a drill sergeant doing drills out, you know, military formation drills. You would have like a Schützenfest, and you would have the Fetischule, and you'd have like other funny games. Like, did he mention the like wrestling in the hole deal, which was really cool? So if you get a chance and you wanted to see our true history nerddom in its full regalia, that would probably be a good episode. All right, so I think that go ahead.
One last thing, just because we've talked about nutrition. It's my understanding that so everyone imagines like Roman like gladiators to be these like super ripped, abs, Brad Pitt, looking. But it's my understanding their diet was, they ate a very like super carb heavy diet, and they ate a lot in order to have a layer of fat, because most gladiatorial combat was not to the death. It was they're fighting for fun and for show, and having that extra layer of fat meant that if you got hits, you're less likely to actually get injured because you had some padding.
Yeah, I saw that too, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Where it's like, plus, like we were talking about, most of us have experienced like getting super lean tends to have lots of side effects, and the people that are like that naturally, they're just kind of genetic mutants, and like there are definite side effects where you don't have as much energy, your testosterone goes down. So being like a not lean gladiator makes a lot of sense, in addition to the having some padding to not die from a cut.
Yeah, I would absolutely attest to being too lean is not a good thing. I got oh man, I must have been in my like late 20s that I got back to my high school weight. That was a bad choice. I could not hit a ball for power at all. Zero. It was a base hit or nothing. I couldn't get it anywhere. Ooh. Not recommended. All right. Well, I guess that pretty much wraps up our episode. The very last thing, Chuck, where can we find you on the interwebs? Where can our listeners and viewers find you?
So my only social media presence is just on Facebook. It's Chuck Gross. My profile is public, and I'm the only Chuck Gross that's bald with a big beard and a sword in my picture.
Nice.
And then I'm on the HEMA-Strong blog, hemastrong.com. And then just the HEMA-Strong group, which should just be, you just search for HEMA-Strong on Facebook.
Yep, I think it's Facebook.com/HEMA-Strong. Yes.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I have like a Twitter account and Instagram, but I basically don't post on there at all, just because.
No, that's great, and yeah. I definitely encourage our viewers to join the HEMA-Strong community if you are so inclined. It is a really cool community, and I'm glad that you were able to build that for our hemaverse.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And
Thanks for having me on.
And yeah, thank you for coming on the show, because I mean, it wasn't really last minute, but man, I love the email correspondence was so quick, and this has been a great chat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Chuck.
All right, take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.
thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.